The Mandalorian curse is a deeply ingrained and multifaceted concept within the Star Wars universe, representing a tragic cycle of conflict, betrayal, and violence that seems to follow the Mandalorian people through their long and tumultuous history. The origins of the curse can be traced to the Mandalorians' inherent warrior culture, a culture built on constant combat and conquest, one that glorifies strength, honor, and bloodshed above all else. From the earliest days of their existence, the Mandalorians have been defined by their martial prowess, their technological innovations, and their sense of unity through their battle-focused philosophy. However, this very focus on warfare and dominance has also been their downfall, with the curse playing out repeatedly through generations in cycles of self-destruction, internal strife, and external warfare. The Mandalorian curse can be seen as a form of cosmic irony, a people who are born from the idea of strength and honor, constantly torn apart by the very traits that make them so formidable. One of the clearest manifestations of this curse is the repeated fall of the Mandalorian people into civil wars, political fragmentation, and conquest. Every rise of a unified Mandalorian army or culture seems inevitably followed by a fall into disarray and internal betrayal. The Mandalorians, despite their seemingly unbreakable unity when faced with a common enemy, often find themselves fractured by internal power struggles. Whether it is the conflict between the Mandalorian clans, the rise of Mandalore the Great, or the downfall of their unified front against the Jedi, the Mandalorians are often victims of their own ambition and hubris. These internal fractures, combined with their inherent inclination toward conquest and violence, create a cyclical nature of destruction that plagues their people. A key element of the Mandalorian curse lies in their relationship with the Jedi Order and the galactic powers. Throughout history, the Mandalorians have been defined as the antagonists to the Jedi, a fact that is both a blessing and a curse. Their war against the Jedi during the Mandalorian Wars was a defining moment in galactic history, and it set the stage for centuries of warfare and political instability. However, the Mandalorians' confrontation with the Jedi was not just a clash of ideologies, it was a battle of destinies. While the Jedi believed in the path of peace and balance, the Mandalorians believed in the path of strength, warfare, and dominance. This dichotomy led to constant conflict between the two factions, and even after the Mandalorian Wars, the curse of the Mandalorians continued as they were often manipulated or drawn into larger galactic conflicts by those seeking to exploit their culture of violence. The Mandalorian curse also manifests in their repeated cycles of victory followed by collapse. Time and time again, the Mandalorians rise to great heights, creating vast empires and conquering entire systems, only to be destroyed by the very forces that they sought to control. This self-destructive tendency is deeply rooted in their history. One of the most infamous examples of this cycle is the rise and fall of the Mandalorian Empire under Mandalore the Ultimate. His ambitions for galactic conquest led the Mandalorians into conflict with the Republic and the Jedi Order, but it also led to the eventual destruction of the Mandalorian people. After their defeat, they were left in ruins, their once mighty empire reduced to rubble and their people scattered across the galaxy. Yet, even in the aftermath, the Mandalorians refused to abandon their identity as warriors, only to fall into more internal strife and conflict as they attempted to rebuild. This pattern of brief triumph followed by destructive collapse has become a hallmark of the Mandalorian experience. In addition to their internal conflict, the Mandalorian curse can also be seen in their relationship with their homeworld, Mandalore. Mandalore, once a vibrant and thriving planet, has become a symbol of the curse itself. The planet's landscape is scarred by constant warfare, and its people have suffered devastating losses time and time again. Mandalore's history is marked by cycles of war, destruction, and rebirth, but each cycle leaves the planet more and more fractured. The Mandalorians' constant desire for military conquest and dominance has led to the planet's near destruction, with the surface of Mandalore being ravaged by war and violence. The planet's environment has been permanently altered by centuries of war, leaving it almost uninhabitable for much of its population. Mandalore is not just a victim of the Mandalorians' martial culture, but also a symbol of their failure to break free from the cycle of self-destruction that defines their history. One of the most significant aspects of the Mandalorian curse is the role of leadership within Mandalorian culture. The Mandalorians have long been led by Mandalore the Great, or other prominent leaders who embody the ideals of strength, honor, and conquest. However, these leaders often lead the Mandalorians into conflict and, ultimately, into their own destruction. The rise of Mandalore the Ultimate during the Mandalorian Wars and his subsequent fall is just one example of how the curse of leadership operates within Mandalorian society. Their leaders are often so deeply committed to warfare that they become blinded by their own ambition, leading their people to war and eventual ruin. This cycle continues, as each new Mandalore is drawn into the same patterns of militarism, only to lead their people into more conflict and destruction. The Mandalorian curse can also be seen in the Mandalorians' relationship with their armor. The Mandalorian armor, iconic in its design and functionality, symbolizes the Mandalorians' warrior culture and their need for protection in an ever-hostile galaxy. However, it also serves as a symbol of the curse itself, a reminder that the Mandalorians are forever bound to their warrior identity and fighting nature. The armor is often seen as a shield, a tool for survival, but it is also a symbol of the violence and bloodshed that defines Mandalorian society. As much as the Mandalorians try to break free from their past, they remain shackled to the warrior ethos symbolized by their armor. This armor represents not only their strength, but also their inability to escape the curse of violence and war that continually haunts them. Another aspect of the Mandalorian curse lies in their complex relationship with the Jedi and the Sith. Throughout their history, the Mandalorians have been at odds with these two opposing forces. The Jedi-Sith conflict often intersects with the Mandalorians' own internal struggles, creating a tragic convergence of ideologies. The Mandalorian Wars, in which the Mandalorians fought against the Jedi and the Galactic Republic, represent one of the most significant and painful chapters in Mandalorian history. The Mandalorians, despite their martial prowess, were ultimately defeated, and their dreams of galactic domination were crushed. This defeat, however, did not end the cycle. Rather, it fueled the Mandalorians' desire for revenge, leading them to repeat the same destructive patterns in subsequent generations. The Mandalorian curse is also represented in the cycle of Mandalorian leadership. The rise of new Mandalore leaders, often following the fall of their predecessors, shows that the Mandalorians cannot escape their own destiny. The Mandalore's role as the chief leader is one of constant conflict and struggle, with each new leader either meeting a tragic end or failing to unify their people. Despite the Mandalorians' desire to build a new future, they are often bound by the traditions of their violent past, making it almost impossible to break free from the cycle of conflict and destruction that has defined their culture. The Mandalorian curse also extends to the Mandalorian people as a whole, who are caught in a cycle of war and survival that stretches across generations. Despite their military prowess and the respect they command across the galaxy, the Mandalorians are often left as victims of their own culture of violence. Their constant warring, their lust for conquest, and their inability to forgive past grievances lead them down a path of self-destruction. This cycle continues, and with each new conflict, the Mandalorians face the possibility of total extermination, or at least the destruction of their way of life. The Mandalorian curse, while deeply ingrained in the culture of the Mandalorians, also ties into their broader place within the galaxy. The Mandalorians, often seen as both warriors and survivors, struggle with the reality of their own existence. Their identity has been shaped by centuries of violence, conquest, and conflict, and despite their incredible resilience, they are trapped in a cycle that they seem unable to escape. The curse manifests not only in the Mandalorian people's internal fractures, but also in their external relations with the galaxy around them. While some might view them as noble warriors, others see them as a dangerous and unstable force, always on the brink of self-destruction. The Mandalorians' relationship with galactic powers such as the Republic and the Empire is one of constant tension. Historically, the Mandalorians have been seen as a threat to galactic stability, their warrior culture ever seeking to expand their reach. Despite their numerous conflicts with the Jedi and Republic, the Mandalorians themselves remain divided. There is no single cohesive ideology or leader who can unite them for any sustained period of time. Their history has been marked by repeated attempts at galactic conquest, only to see their ambitions undone by internal conflict or external forces, leading to their eventual downfall. The Mandalorian curse can be traced back to the very formation of their culture, one centered on the ideal of strength and battle. From the beginning, the Mandalorians embraced the notion that war was their destiny, and it was the pursuit of combat that defined their culture. The Mandalorian curse is also reflected in their homeworld, Mandalore, which has suffered immense damage over the centuries. Once a thriving planet with a proud and advanced civilization, Mandalore is now a wasteland scarred by years of warfare and devastation. The planet's once lush landscapes have been ravaged by the effects of the Mandalorians' constant internal and external conflicts. The Mandalorian people have fought for control of their homeworld time and time again, but each victory has only led to further destruction. Mandalore stands as a symbol of the curse that has followed the Mandalorians. Every rise of the Mandalorian people has led to the fall of their civilization, and each rebuilding brings with it the possibility of new conflicts that will tear them apart once again. Despite these cycles of conflict, hope remains. There are those among the Mandalorians who seek to break the curse and find a way to bring peace and stability to their people. The Mandalorian resistance, led by figures such as Sabine Wren and Bo-Katan Kryze, is an example of those who wish to create a new future for Mandalore. Sabine, in particular, represents the new generation of Mandalorians who are willing to reject the old ways of violence and seek a path of understanding and unity. These individuals are trying to forge a path that moves beyond the warrior mentality that has defined their people for centuries. They seek to rebuild Mandalore into a homeworld that is not just defined by battle, but by prosperity and cooperation. Whether they will succeed in breaking the Mandalorian curse remains to be seen, but their efforts represent a new hope for the Mandalorian people, one that is not dictated by the cycles of war and destruction that have marked their history. A significant aspect of the Mandalorian curse is the role of leadership within their society. Historically, the Mandalorians have been led by Mandalore the Great, who was viewed as a symbol of their unified strength. However, these leaders, while formidable, often became symbols of the curse themselves, as they would rise to power only to succumb to their own flaws or be undone by their enemies. The ambition of these leaders, combined with the internal conflicts within Mandalorian society, has often led to the disintegration of the unity they worked so hard to build. The legacy of Mandalore the Ultimate and his ambitious campaign against the Republic ultimately led to the fall of their empire. While the Mandalorians often rally behind new leaders, the cycle continues, with each new Mandalore either failing to maintain unity or leading the Mandalorians into yet another devastating conflict. This curse of leadership, of leaders who rise and fall, of hopeful unification that is torn apart by greed, pride, or betrayal, keeps the Mandalorians trapped in a cycle they seem unable to break. The Mandalorian curse is not just a curse of violence, but one of identity. The Mandalorians are proud of their warrior culture, but they are also cursed by it. Their entire society is built around the idea that combat and strength are the most important aspects of their existence. The Mandalorian curse, however, may not be an entirely hopeless fate. There is potential for redemption in the Mandalorian people, with leaders like Sabine Wren, Bo-Katan Kryze, and others. The possibility of a redefined Mandalore exists. The question, however, is whether the Mandalorians can truly break free from their violent past and forge a new identity, one that is not defined by the cycles of war, but by healing and growth. The curse can only be broken if the Mandalorians choose to move beyond their warrior roots, embracing the concept of balance instead of conquest. Until then, the Mandalorians may remain trapped in the same destructive cycles, unable to escape the very legacy that defines them. The Mandalorian curse, as it has been passed down through the ages, is not just a cyclical event that plagues their culture, but a deeply entrenched psychological and cultural inheritance that permeates the way the Mandalorian people perceive themselves. While many Mandalorians fight to break the cycle of violence and destruction, the curse is not easily overcome because it is woven into the very fabric of their identity. It is ingrained in their warrior culture, their beliefs, and their traditions. The idea of the Mandalorian people as warriors is central to their worldview, shaping everything from their concepts of honor to their sense of purpose in the galaxy. Mandalorians often view themselves as the galactic underdogs, proud of their resilience and fighting spirit, but also weighed down by the legacy of their past mistakes. Despite their seemingly invincible nature as warriors, Mandalorians are often the first to face the darkness within themselves. The curse is not just external, it is an internal struggle that threatens to consume them from within. Pride, ambition, and anger have long been the driving forces behind the Mandalorian warriors' pursuit of dominance. They seek to prove themselves worthy of being the galactic conquerors they once were, but in doing so, they inadvertently bring about their own destruction. Each generation faces the challenge of reconciling the past, their history of glory and destruction, with their future as a people who must evolve beyond the concept of war and embrace a more balanced existence. One of the most prominent examples of the curse's influence is seen in the rise of the Mandalorian clans. The Mandalorians' culture is rooted in tribalism, where different clans fight for power and control over their society. These clan-based divisions further fuel the cycle of self-destruction, as each clan seeks to establish its own dominance over the others. While the Mandalorians are bound by their shared history and martial traditions, their inability to unite as a single people under one banner is a direct result of the curse. Even when they have the potential to unite against a common enemy, their infighting and desire for control often undermine any attempts at solidarity. This inability to unify as a people perpetuates the curse, ensuring that the Mandalorians will never fully escape their own destructive cycle. However, as the curse continues to unfold, new figures are emerging who seek to break the cycle and redefine what it means to be Mandalorian. Sabine Wren, Bo-Katan cries, and others have come to symbolize the hope that the Mandalorians can evolve beyond their violent past. Sabine, in particular, represents a new generation of Mandalorians who reject the notion that warfare and conquest are the only paths to honor. Sabine's rejection of the traditional Mandalorian ways, her decision to walk away from the warrior culture and fight for something greater, shows that the Mandalorian curse can be overcome. By embracing creativity and unity instead of warfare, Sabine offers a vision for Mandalore that goes beyond the endless cycle of conflict. Her journey parallels that of the Mandalorian people. As a member of the Wren clan, Sabine carries the weight of her family's legacy, which is steeped in the Mandalorian tradition of battle. However, rather than embracing the destructive aspects of this heritage, Sabine chooses to use her skills and passion for creating something positive, a path that leads her away from violence and towards the idea that the Mandalorians can be known for something other than their bloodthirsty reputation. Sabine's journey highlights that breaking the curse is not about rejecting Mandalorian culture entirely, but about transforming it into something that is more than just a culture of war. Another significant figure in this new wave of Mandalorians is Bo-Katan Kryze, whose leadership represents a shift in the Mandalorian people's understanding of their identity. Bo-Katan's efforts to reclaim Mandalore and unite the clans showcase the potential for the Mandalorians to break free from their curse. Unlike previous Mandalorian leaders who led through force and conquest, Bo-Katan's leadership is focused on restoring peace and healing the wounds of the past. She recognizes the destructive nature of the Mandalorian desire for constant war and seeks to unite the clans in a way that doesn't repeat the mistakes of Mandalore the Ultimate or Mandalore the Indomitable. Her role as a leader who seeks to balance Mandalorian honor with a need for peace marks a pivotal shift in the Mandalorian narrative, showing that they can move forward without being weighed down by their past. Despite these emerging leaders, the Mandalorian curse remains a persistent force in their society. The cycle of conflict is not easily broken, and the curse's grip on the Mandalorian people is not so easily dismissed. The traditions of war, pride, and honor run deep, and many Mandalorians continue to resist the idea of change, preferring instead to hold on to the ways of the past. This internal resistance is another layer of the curse, one that challenges the new generation of Mandalorians seeking to redefine their people's legacy. In the end, whether the Mandalorian curse is truly broken depends on the ability of the Mandalorian people to embrace self-reflection, growth, and unity. It is clear that figures like Sabine and Bo-Katan are pushing for a future that transcends the endless cycle of violence, but their success will depend on their ability to convince the people of Mandalore to break free from the past and embrace a future where peace and honor are not defined by war, but by cooperation, healing, and a shared vision for a brighter future. The galaxy as a whole may have moved beyond the time of the Empire, but the Mandalorians, with their unique cultural identity, will continue to face the challenges posed by the curse. Their martial prowess remains unmatched, but it is their ability to unite and evolve that will ultimately determine their future. The curse, much like the past, cannot be erased overnight, but the hope remains that the next generation of Mandalorians can find a way to overcome it and create a new legacy, one that is not defined by violence, but by balance, understanding, and the willingness to change. The Mandalorian curse is not just a historical or cultural phenomenon, it's an ongoing struggle that continues to shape the future of the Mandalorian people. Despite the efforts of leaders like Bo-Katan Kryze, Sabine Wren, and others who seek to break free from the cycles of violence and war, the Mandalorians remain a people defined by their warrior identity. The legacy of conquest is deeply embedded in the Mandalorian psyche, making it difficult to fully break from the ideals that have sustained their society for generations. As the galaxy moves forward, the Mandalorians face a choice: continue down the path that has brought them so much suffering and destruction, or embrace a future that allows for healing and growth. The shift toward reconciliation and unity is complicated by the cultural importance of Mandalorian armor and the values it represents. The iconic Beskar armor is more than just protective gear. It is a symbol of strength, identity, and honor. For many Mandalorians, the armor is a direct connection to their warrior roots and a sign of their historical legacy. However, as the galaxy evolves and new generations of Mandalorians seek to redefine their path, the armor itself can become both a symbol of freedom and a barrier to change. The challenge lies in finding a way to preserve the important aspects of Mandalorian identity without being enslaved to the violent history it represents. Ahsoka Tano's influence on the Mandalorians, particularly on figures like Sabine Wren, has begun to provide an example of how to navigate this difficult transition. Ahsoka's own journey from Jedi Padawan to independent Force user is one of self-discovery and balance. She rejected the dogmas of the Jedi Order, not out of anger or defiance, but because she saw the limitations of their approach. In doing so, she found her own way forward, and in the process became an example for others who were seeking to break free from the rigid ideologies that have governed their lives. Sabine Wren, for instance, has taken inspiration from Ahsoka's example, learning that the path of strength doesn't have to be defined by conquest or violence, but by creativity, leadership, and healing. However, the challenge remains: how do you change a culture that has been defined by violence and warfare for centuries? The Mandalorian's martial identity is not something that can be discarded overnight. One possible avenue for breaking the Mandalorian curse lies in reconnecting with the broader galaxy. The Mandalorians have long been an isolated and insular people, often at odds with other factions and struggling to carve out a place for themselves in the galaxy. However, as the galaxy continues to heal from the wounds of the Empire, there is an opportunity for the Mandalorians to forge new alliances and find common ground with other peoples, cultures, and groups. This effort will require humility, self-reflection, and a willingness to set aside old grudges and prejudices in favor of unity. The Mandalorians have much to offer the galaxy. Their warrior spirit, their resilience, and their honor can contribute to the greater good if they learn to embrace a more inclusive and cooperative mindset. The Mandalorians' relationship with the Jedi and Sith has often been defined by opposition, with the Mandalorians seeking to prove their strength against the Jedi Order and the Sith fighting for their own vision of the galaxy's future. This adversarial relationship has been one of the defining characteristics of Mandalorian culture. However, in the aftermath of the Empire's fall, there is an opportunity to reconcile with those who were once viewed as enemies. The Mandalorians do not have to see the Jedi as their adversaries or the Sith as a threat. They can see them as allies in the greater mission of galactic peace. This would require a fundamental shift in thinking. Rather than defining themselves by their conflicts and rivalries, the Mandalorians must learn to embrace the galaxy's diversity, recognizing that it is cooperation, not confrontation, that will secure the future for their people. The Mandalorians' relationship with other cultures in the galaxy is just as important. The Mandalorian curse is not just a curse within Mandalorian society, it affects their interactions with other cultures as well. For centuries, the Mandalorians have been seen as a force of chaos and destruction, often causing suffering wherever they go. Their reputation as mercenaries, warriors, and conquerors has made it difficult for them to form lasting alliances with others. However, as the Mandalorians begin to break free from their violent past, they must find ways to repair these relationships. It will be a slow process, but if the Mandalorians are truly committed to change, they must seek understanding and cooperation with those they have historically opposed. This process may begin with small gestures of goodwill, offering aid to those in need, assisting in the rebuilding of planets devastated by war, and demonstrating that the Mandalorians can be more than just warriors, but builders and healers as well. The future of the Mandalorian people lies not in their ability to conquer, but in their willingness to adapt, evolve, and embrace the galaxy's diversity. The curse will not be broken easily, but with courage, leadership, and a willingness to change, the Mandalorians can build a future that is defined not by their past failures, but by their potential for growth and unity. In this future, the Mandalorians will no longer be a people defined by violence, but by their ability to create and build a more peaceful galaxy for all. As the Mandalorian curse continues to affect the Mandalorian people, it is crucial to acknowledge the deeper psychological roots of this cycle of violence and destruction. Mandalore's people have been shaped by war for so long that it has become their identity, in many ways inescapable. Honor, strength, and combat have always been core values, but these traits, when taken to their extreme, have kept the Mandalorians locked in a state of perpetual conflict. The warrior ethos that defines them, while noble, has often been their greatest weakness. In many ways, it is not just the wars they fought, but their inability to evolve that has kept them trapped in a cycle of endless violence and bloodshed. The Mandalorian curse is compounded by their deep-seated pride. While pride can be an essential motivator, driving individuals to achieve greatness, in the Mandalorian case, it has often pushed them toward destruction. The Mandalorian pride in their combat skills, warrior status, and sense of unity has been a source of strength for the people, but also a catalyst for their repeated failures. Rather than building on their strengths and learning from their past mistakes, the Mandalorians have, for much of their history, repeated the same pattern. They rise to power, unify under one strong leader, and then fall apart, often in the wake of their own internal discord and ambition. What often prevents them from breaking the curse is their reluctance to change. The Mandalorians, proud and strong, are often resistant to new ideas that challenge the traditional warrior code. Their rigid commitment to their culture of violence, which includes the constant need to fight and conquer, has prevented them from finding new ways of life. The curse seems to dictate that for every rebirth or resurgence of Mandalorian power, there is always an eventual destruction that follows. The cycle of conflict that has defined their culture continues to perpetuate itself, like a force beyond their control. However, there are always outliers who see the destructive path their people are on and seek to change it, but these voices often get lost amid the louder call for war, glory, and dominance. This internal conflict within the Mandalorian culture is exemplified by the shifting attitudes of younger generations, such as Sabine Wren, who seeks to redefine the meaning of Mandalorian honor. Sabine's willingness to reject the old ways of warfare and instead pursue a path of creativity and reconciliation represents a glimmer of hope for a people who have long been trapped in a cycle of violence. Through her work as a leader and revolutionary, Sabine stands as a living example of the potential for transformation within Mandalorian society. Her defiance of the old Mandalorian ideals and her commitment to finding peace rather than war offers the possibility that the curse can indeed be broken, but only if future generations are willing to embrace change and move beyond the violent past. For Mandalore and the Mandalorians to survive as a unified people, they must be willing to break the chains of their own destructive traditions. At the heart of this transformation lies the question of leadership. Throughout their history, Mandalore has been governed by a central figure, the Mandalore, who leads through force and military might. The Mandalore's authority has been absolute, and their power has often been derived from their ability to lead their people in battle. However, this leadership has often been short-lived, as the burden of constant warfare and unresolved conflict eventually leads to the downfall of these strong leaders. Mandalore the Ultimate, Mandalore the Indomitable, and others like them represent the Mandalorian tendency to embrace authoritarian rule as a means of maintaining unity. But the Mandalorian experience shows that this style of leadership is unsustainable and ultimately leads to the collapse of Mandalorian society, as the Mandalore's downfall signals the fall of their entire culture. To break free from this pattern, the Mandalorians need a new type of leadership, one that does not rely on militarism and strength, but on vision, unity, and self-determination. Leaders like Bo-Katan Kryze, who seek to rebuild Mandalore not through bloodshed, but through cooperation and healing, represent the future of the Mandalorians. They understand that the galaxy no longer requires the Mandalorians to act as warrior conquerors, but as peacekeepers and builders. In the post-Empire galaxy, the Mandalorians' role can be one of healing, not of domination. The Mandalorians can still honor their warrior identity, but they must understand that their place in the galaxy is not to conquer, but to contribute to the galactic peace. A significant part of breaking the Mandalorian curse also involves the reclamation of Mandalore itself. For so long, the planet Mandalore has been a symbol of the violence and destruction that have characterized the Mandalorians' history. The planet's surface has been ravaged by centuries of war, leaving it a barren wasteland, a reflection of the chaos that the Mandalorians have inflicted upon their own home. However, Mandalore's reclamation does not just involve physical rebuilding but spiritual healing. For the Mandalorians to move forward, they must learn to see Mandalore as a symbol of hope and resilience, not just as a place of battle and suffering. By rebuilding their home world with a new vision, the Mandalorians can redefine their relationship with the galaxy, not as a people defined by war and conquest, but as a people who overcame their violent past and chose to build a new future. For the Mandalorian people, the challenge will be to acknowledge the curse that has haunted them for centuries and then actively work together to break it. While the warrior spirit that defines them has always been their strength, it is now their greatest liability. The curse of war can only be broken if the Mandalorians learn to unite around new ideals, goals, and a shared vision of peace and cooperation with the galaxy at large. If they can let go of their attachment to violence and domination, the Mandalorians have the potential to not only heal their own wounds, but to contribute to the galaxy's healing as well. The curse will not disappear overnight, but as the next generation of Mandalorians rises, there is hope that they can build a future that is no longer defined by bloodshed, but by unity, respect, and a willingness to change. The Mandalorian curse is a concept that has deep roots in the culture of the Mandalorians, and it is not something that can be overcome simply through leadership change or military defeat. The curse stems from a deeper place, one that is embedded in the very nature of Mandalorian society. It's a curse of identity, tradition, and the deep psychological scars left by generations of war, conquest, and loss. The Mandalorians have been caught in a cycle of violence and self-destruction for so long that breaking the curse requires not just external change, but a fundamental shift in the way the Mandalorians see themselves and their place in the galaxy. At the core of the curse is the Mandalorian identity. For centuries, their warrior culture has defined them, and the pride they take in their martial prowess is unmatched. However, this very pride has been both their strength and their downfall. The Mandalorians have been so deeply invested in being the ultimate warriors, the defenders of honor, that they have often failed to recognize the true cost of their way of life. The wars they have fought, the conquests they have pursued, have left their people broken and fractured. Honor and strength, while noble ideals, have become twisted in the Mandalorian culture, leading them to embrace conflict over peace, power over reconciliation, and domination over coexistence. The self-destructive nature of the curse is most evident in the Mandalorians' failure to unite. Time and time again, they have been on the verge of achieving greatness, only to see their efforts undone by internal divisions, betrayals, and conflicts. Their inability to maintain unity has been one of the most damaging aspects of their culture. Even when they are united in purpose, the Mandalorian people often fall apart at the first sign of conflict or betrayal. This failure to come together as one people, to set aside their differences in the face of larger threats, perpetuates the cycle of self-destruction. One of the most significant aspects of the Mandalorian curse is the idea of honor. Honor has always been at the heart of Mandalorian culture, and it is often misunderstood as something that must be maintained through violence and conquest. However, as the galaxy moves toward a more peaceful and cooperative future, there are signs that the Mandalorians are beginning to see a way forward. Figures like Sabine Wren and Bo-Katan Kryze represent a new generation of Mandalorians who are willing to break from the past and embrace the idea that there is more to life than war and conquest. These leaders understand that the Mandalorians can still honor their warrior spirit, but they must do so in a way that benefits the galaxy as a whole. Their efforts to rebuild Mandalore, to redefine what it means to be Mandalorian, offer hope for the future. As the galaxy continues to recover from the devastation wrought by the Empire and the war, the Mandalorians are left to confront their own legacy. The Mandalorian curse, deeply embedded in their culture, continues to shape their destiny, but there is hope that it can be overcome. The shift away from the old ways of violence and conquest is not easy, but it is possible. The Mandalorians must now face the most difficult challenge of all, redefining their identity in a galaxy that no longer requires them to be the warrior race they once were. The time has come for them to prove that their strength is not simply defined by their ability to fight, but by their capacity to adapt and evolve. The curse that has followed the Mandalorians for generations is not just a result of external conflict, but also of internal strife. The factions within Mandalorian society, the rivalries between the clans, and the constant fighting for supremacy have kept the Mandalorians from ever achieving lasting unity. The Mandalorians are a proud people, but their pride has often led them down a path of destruction. Their inability to work together, to set aside their differences in the face of greater threats, has been one of the major causes of their downfall. As they rebuild after the Empire's collapse, they must learn to work together in a way that they never have before. Mandalorian history has shown time and time again that their greatest strength can also be their greatest weakness, their warrior ethos. Mandalorians are skilled fighters, and they have proven themselves time and again as formidable adversaries. However, their single-minded focus on combat has prevented them from truly evolving as a society. Their honor and pride have often been misguided, leading them to pursue warfare at the expense of cooperation and peace. The Mandalorian curse is the product of this unwavering adherence to the warrior tradition, and breaking it requires a fundamental change in how the Mandalorians view themselves and their place in the galaxy. The effort to break the curse begins with leadership. In the past, the Mandalore has been a symbol of strength and warrior dominance, often rising to power through battle and conquest. However, the rise of leaders like Bo-Katan Kryze and Sabine Wren signals a shift in the Mandalorian approach to leadership. These leaders understand that the path to true strength lies not in domination, but in unity, understanding, and cooperation. Bo-Katan, in particular, represents a shift toward a new kind of leadership, one that seeks to rebuild Mandalore by healing its wounds, not by fighting new battles. This approach, which seeks to reconcile the Mandalorian people rather than divide them, may offer the key to breaking the Mandalorian curse once and for all. The role of Sabine Wren in this process cannot be understated. Her leadership has already begun to shift the Mandalorian mindset. Sabine's decision to leave behind the traditional warrior culture and instead pursue a path of creativity and reconciliation offers a new model for the Mandalorians to follow. Sabine represents the next generation of Mandalorians, those who will not be defined by the wars and conquests of the past, but by their ability to create and build a new future. Through her efforts, Sabine is showing the Mandalorians that strength can be found in innovation, cooperation, and the willingness to embrace change, rather than in blind adherence to the old ways of violence and conquest. For the Mandalorians, breaking the curse also means confronting their past. The cycle of violence that has defined their history cannot be erased, but it can be acknowledged and learned from. The Mandalorians must come to terms with their past failures, mistakes, and misguided choices in order to move forward. This process of self-reflection will require not just courage, but humility, the ability to recognize that the Mandalorian way is not the only way, and that there is more to their identity than their ability to fight. The Mandalorian curse can only be broken when the Mandalorians accept responsibility for their actions and choose to change. As the galaxy shifts toward a more cooperative and unified future, the Mandalorians have a unique opportunity to redefine their role in the greater galactic order. Their history has been marked by violence, betrayal, and war, but it need not be defined by these things forever. Through the leadership of individuals like Sabine, Bo-Katan, and others, the Mandalorians can choose to break free from the cycles of war and create a new identity, one based on unity, healing, and understanding. The Mandalorian curse may have shaped their past, but it does not have to shape their future. The ultimate question for the Mandalorians is whether they are willing to let go of the past and embrace the future. The curse that has followed them for generations can only be broken if they are willing to change and adapt to the new realities of the galaxy. If they can do so, they will find that their true strength lies not in their ability to fight, but in their ability to coexist, create, and build a new future for themselves and the galaxy. As the Mandalorians continue their journey to redefine themselves, one of the most significant challenges they face is rebuilding their homeworld, Mandalore, and reconciling their past with their future. For so long, Mandalore has been a symbol of their violent history, a planet scarred by centuries of war and conquest. It was a world once known for its proud warrior traditions, but also one that suffered immensely from the endless cycles of destruction and division. The surface of Mandalore is a reflection of the people who inhabit it, scarred, broken, and fragmented by years of infighting, betrayal, and war. Yet, within this destruction, there lies a potential for healing and growth. For the Mandalorians to truly break free from the curse, they must rebuild their homeworld, not just physically, but spiritually. Mandalore can no longer be a symbol of war and conquest. It must become a place of reconciliation, understanding, and unity. This process of rebuilding Mandalore begins with the Mandalorian people themselves, as they must learn to work together in ways they have never done before. The clan-based divisions that have defined Mandalorian society must give way to a more cohesive vision of what it means to be Mandalorian in the modern galaxy. The Mandalorians must redefine what honor means, shifting away from the violent connotations of the past toward an understanding of honor that includes respect, compassion, and unity. The cultural transformation that the Mandalorians need to undergo in order to break the curse is deeply connected to their relationship with the galaxy at large. For far too long, the Mandalorians have been isolated from the rest of the galaxy, defined by their independence and self-sufficiency. While this has allowed them to maintain their warrior identity, it has also kept them from truly engaging with the broader political and social structures of the galaxy. The Mandalorians have often been seen as a threat by other factions, particularly the Republic and the Jedi, because of their military and expansionist tendencies. However, as the galaxy continues to recover from the Empire's fall, the Mandalorians have an opportunity to redefine their relationship with the rest of the galaxy. Rather than seeing themselves as a separate and isolated people, they must recognize that they are part of a larger whole. To do so, they will have to embrace the idea that cooperation and collaboration can be just as powerful as conquest and war. One of the most significant changes in the Mandalorian approach to the galaxy will be their willingness to form alliances. Throughout their history, the Mandalorians have often viewed alliances as a sign of weakness, preferring to rely on their own strength rather than the support of others. However, the reality is that the galaxy is too large and too complex for any one people or faction to dominate it alone. To ensure the survival of their culture and their people, the Mandalorians must recognize the value of alliances not just for military gain, but for political and social cooperation as well. The Mandalorians must build relationships with other factions, species, and organizations, learning to work with those who were once considered their enemies. This process of building bridges with the galaxy's other powers will require the Mandalorians to set aside their pride, to let go of old grudges, and to embrace a vision of unity that includes not just themselves, but the greater galaxy. This idea of galactic cooperation is reflected in the actions of Sabine Wren, who represents a new generation of Mandalorians that is not defined by violence, but by a desire to create lasting peace. Sabine's leadership shows that the Mandalorians can be a force for good in the galaxy, not just through their martial strength, but through their ability to heal and build. Sabine has already begun the process of redefining what it means to be Mandalorian, using her creativity, art, and diplomacy as tools to rebuild the Mandalorian identity. Her efforts demonstrate that the Mandalorians' strength is not in their ability to destroy, but in their ability to create and collaborate. If more Mandalorians follow Sabine's example and embrace a vision of peace and cooperation, they may be able to break free from the destructive cycle of war and violence that has long defined them. A key part of this process will be the integration of the Mandalorian people into the broader galactic community. As the new Republic continues to rebuild, it will need the support of all its member worlds and factions. The Mandalorians, if they can move past their violent past and redefine their culture, will have a crucial role to play in the rebuilding of the galaxy. Their skills, resilience, and leadership can contribute to the galactic peace, provided they are willing to embrace a new identity, one that is not rooted in violence and conquest, but in unity, creativity, and cooperation. The Mandalorians' future will ultimately depend on their ability to transcend the curse that has bound them for centuries. The curse has been a result of their unwavering attachment to a warrior identity, their destructive pride, and their refusal to embrace change. But through the leadership of individuals like Sabine Wren, Bo-Katan Kryze, and others, the Mandalorians have the opportunity to break the cycle. They can rebuild Mandalore, not as a symbol of war, but as a symbol of healing and hope. By embracing cooperation and understanding with the galaxy at large, the Mandalorians can create a future that is defined not by conquest, but by their ability to build a united, peaceful galaxy. As the Mandalorians' journey continues, they face a monumental challenge to rewrite their story, to transform from a people defined by war to a people who can live in peace. It is a task that will not be easy, but with leadership, vision, and unity, it is a path they can follow. The Mandalorian curse does not have to define them forever. Their future can be shaped by their willingness to change, their desire to collaborate, and their ability to rebuild. If the Mandalorians can learn from the past and choose to embrace peace, they will find that their true strength lies not in their ability to conquer, but in their ability to reconcile, unite, and create a new identity for themselves and the galaxy. As the Mandalorians continue to redefine their identity in the galaxy, the opportunity for them to forge a new path becomes more apparent. This path, however, will not be free of challenges. The galaxy remains a dangerous place, with the First Order continuing to rise from the ashes of the Empire and various other factions seeking to gain power. The Mandalorians' ability to navigate these challenges will be central to their future, and their success will depend on how well they can embrace the principles of cooperation, adaptation, and healing. The Mandalorian curse, with its deeply rooted history of war, honor, and conquest, is not something that can be broken overnight. It is a curse that has defined them for generations, one that has been passed down through family lines and cultural traditions. However, the Mandalorians' ability to change and their willingness to confront their past gives them a unique opportunity to transcend the curse. As the New Republic seeks to solidify its power in the galaxy, the Mandalorians must decide whether they will continue to be defined by their martial culture or if they will choose a new identity, one that is rooted in peace and reconciliation. The future of the Mandalorians depends on their ability to embrace change without losing sight of their core values. One of the critical challenges in breaking the Mandalorian curse is the Mandalorians' relationship with their own identity. The warrior culture that defines them is so deeply ingrained that it is difficult to imagine a future where they do not identify as a people of warriors. However, the changing political landscape of the galaxy calls for a new approach to their identity. The Mandalorians' martial prowess is valuable, but it must be channeled in a way that contributes to galactic stability and peace, rather than conflict. As the galaxy recovers from the devastating effects of the Empire, there is an urgent need for healers, leaders, and diplomats, figures who can help mend the wounds left by decades of war. The Mandalorians, if they embrace this role, can shift the narrative of their culture from one of destruction to one of healing. The transition from a warrior society to one focused on rebuilding and cooperation will be a difficult one. The Mandalorians must come to terms with the fact that their legacy of war has weakened them in some respects. Their focus on military might and conquest has made them vulnerable to both external threats and internal strife. The inability to unite under a single vision has perpetuated a cycle of self-destruction, and unless they can redefine what it means to be Mandalorian, they will continue to fall into the same traps. Breaking the curse requires a shift in mindset, where honor is no longer about dominating the galaxy, but about finding ways to work together and contribute to the common good. An important part of this shift is the asterisk, Mandalorian's relationship with the Jedi Order and the Force. The Mandalorians' long-standing antagonism with the Jedi has been one of the defining features of their history. Their encounters with the Jedi have often been framed as battles between light and dark, but the reality is that the Mandalorians and the Jedi share a common enemy: the desire for domination and control. The Jedi, with their strict adherence to light and darkness, often viewed the Mandalorians as a threat to the peace they sought to preserve. However, the Mandalorians' obsession with warfare and domination made them vulnerable to the same flaws as the Jedi and the Sith: an inability to see beyond their narrow vision of what the galaxy should be. For the Mandalorians to break the curse, they must accept that their history with the Jedi and the Sith is complicated, but that their true power lies not in conflict, but in cooperation. Ahsoka Tano, as a key figure in the galaxy's evolution, represents a path for the Mandalorians to follow. Ahsoka's journey, as someone who has rejected both the Jedi Order and the Sith's doctrines, shows that there is another way forward, one where the Force is not used to dominate or control, but to create and balance. Ahsoka's example, particularly in her role as a mentor to Sabine Wren and others, demonstrates that leadership and honor can be rooted in understanding and compassion rather than military might. Ahsoka's influence can serve as a model for the Mandalorians as they work to reshape their culture and redefine what it means to be Mandalorian in the post-Empire galaxy. The Mandalorians' future depends on their ability to embrace change and adapt to the realities of the galaxy. No longer can they be defined by war and conquest alone. The galaxy is healing, and the Mandalorians must be part of that healing process. They must learn that true strength lies not in fighting, but in building relationships, building alliances, and building a future that transcends their violent past. The Mandalorian curse is not a fate they are condemned to live with forever. Through leadership, understanding, and a willingness to embrace the changing world around them, the Mandalorians can find a new path forward, a path that honors their warrior spirit while embracing the values of peace and cooperation. As the galaxy moves forward into a new era, the Mandalorians will face many challenges. They will continue to struggle with their identity and the curse that has followed them for so long. But there is hope. With the leadership of figures like Sabine Wren, Bo-Katan, Kryze, and others, the Mandalorians have the opportunity to break the cycle of violence and destruction that has defined them. Their resilience and strength will serve them well, but it is their ability to adapt and evolve that will determine their future. The Mandalorians can choose to be more than just warriors. They can become leaders and builders of a new galaxy, one where honor, strength, and peace are no longer defined by war, but by collaboration and understanding. As the Mandalorians move forward from the shadows of their violent past, they are confronted with the stark reality of their future: a galaxy that is no longer defined by the ideals of war and conquest. The post-Empire galaxy is one of fragility and uncertainty, where factions are still struggling to define their place in the grand scheme of the New Republic and beyond. While the Empire's fall has opened up opportunities for peace and rebuilding, the galaxy's wounds remain deep, and the Mandalorians, as a people who have long thrived on their warrior identity, must confront the idea that war is no longer the only path forward. This realization is a daunting one for a people so deeply entrenched in the pursuit of strength through combat. However, despite these challenges, the Mandalorians possess an inherent resilience that has allowed them to survive through even the most devastating of conflicts. This resilience is what makes them such a pivotal force in the galaxy's recovery. In the absence of the Empire, the galaxy requires strong leaders, and the Mandalorians, with their long history of leadership in battle, are uniquely positioned to step into this role. But this new role requires a departure from the warrior-centric mindset that has guided them for so long. The shift from being a people who see themselves primarily as warriors to being a people who are capable of governance, diplomacy, and cooperation with other factions in the galaxy will require a re-evaluation of their values. At the heart of this transformation is the new generation of Mandalorians, led by figures like Sabine Wren and Bo-Katan Kryze, who are challenging the traditional notions of honor that have defined Mandalorian society for centuries. Sabine, in particular, is an example of a Mandalorian who has embraced her past but is also willing to forge a new future. Her journey is one of self-discovery, as she navigates her role as both a Mandalorian and a galactic citizen. Sabine's story reflects the tension between honoring one's heritage and adapting to a changing world. Her decision to leave behind the militaristic ideals of the past in favor of a path of creativity and peace is a direct challenge to the Mandalorian curse. In a similar vein, Bo-Katan Kryze represents a new wave of Mandalorian leadership, one that seeks to reconcile the old ways with the needs of the present. While Bo-Katan is still deeply rooted in the warrior traditions of her people, she understands the importance of rebuilding and reuniting the fractured Mandalorian clans. Her efforts to restore peace to Mandalore are about more than just securing a place of military dominance. They are about healing the wounds caused by years of division and betrayal. Bo-Katan's leadership reflects the shift in Mandalorian thinking, a shift that seeks to move beyond the endless cycles of violence and revenge that have long defined their history. These leaders, along with others, are part of a growing movement within Mandalorian society that understands the importance of peace as a cornerstone of strength. They are rejecting the notion that war and honor are inherently linked and are striving to define a new form of Mandalorian identity, one that is not based on violence and conquest, but on cooperation, unity, and growth. This transformation is not easy, and it requires the entire Mandalorian people to look inward and ask themselves difficult questions. What does it truly mean to be Mandalorian? How can they honor their past without being defined by it? Can they embrace their warrior culture while also adapting to a galaxy that no longer needs warriors? The role of Mandalore in this transformation cannot be understated. The planet itself has long been a symbol of the Mandalorian people's strength and identity. It is the birthplace of their culture and the heart of their warrior spirit. But Mandalore has also been the site of incredible destruction and bloodshed, and its very landscape reflects the scars left by years of conflict. For the Mandalorians to break free from the curse, they must also break free from the idea that Mandalore is simply a symbol of war and conquest. They must see Mandalore not as a battleground, but as a foundation for peace, a place where the Mandalorians can come together, reconcile, and begin anew. This rebuilding of Mandalore is a monumental task, but it is also an essential one. It represents the first step toward healing the Mandalorian people and breaking the cycles of violence and destruction that have held them back. The reconstruction of the planet should not be limited to physical infrastructure, but must also include the rebuilding of the Mandalorian spirit, a spiritual healing that allows the people to move forward with a new vision for their future. The Mandalorian curse will only be broken if the Mandalorians can rebuild their homeworld in a way that reflects their evolution as a people. This process will require patience, understanding, and a willingness to change, but it is the only way forward. The path to breaking the curse also involves the Mandalorians' relationship with the rest of the galaxy. The Mandalorians have long been seen as outsiders, isolated from the greater galactic community. Their culture has often been defined by their independence and self-sufficiency, but the galaxy has changed. The Empire's fall has led to the rise of a new galactic order, one that emphasizes cooperation and peace. The Mandalorians must decide whether they want to continue as outsiders, constantly at odds with the rest of the galaxy, or whether they are ready to integrate into this new world order. Their future lies in their ability to adapt to the galactic community, to build alliances with other factions, and to contribute to the restoration of the galaxy. The next generation of Mandalorian leaders, like Sabine Wren and Bo-Katan Kryze, will be instrumental in defining this future. They represent the hope that the Mandalorians can evolve beyond their history of war and violence, and find a new identity as builders and healers. This transformation will not be easy, but it is possible. The Mandalorians have always been a people of strength, but now it is time for them to prove that their greatest strength lies not in conquest, but in healing, understanding, and unity. The Mandalorian curse will be broken when the Mandalorians choose a future where they can be defined by their ability to create and rebuild, not by their ability to fight and destroy. As the Mandalorians step into this new era, their evolution will be shaped not only by leaders like Sabine Wren and Bo-Katan Kryze, but by the very people of Mandalore, who must embrace a new identity, one not bound by the curse of their violent past, but built on the foundations of healing, unity, and resilience. While the curse has lingered in the form of cycles of war, division, and destruction, the opportunity for change lies in the next generation of Mandalorians, who can see beyond their warrior heritage and carve out a path that leads toward coexistence rather than conflict. The most difficult challenge they face, however, is not merely the external factors, like the rise of the First Order or the ongoing struggles within the galactic community, but the internal battle within the Mandalorian soul itself. The Mandalorians, for all their resilience, pride, and strength, are still deeply entrenched in their warrior identity. The path forward requires them to reject the singular idea of honor through warfare and destruction, and instead redefine what it means to be Mandalorian in a galaxy that no longer needs its warriors to conquer, but to cooperate and build. The Mandalorians must face the reality that strength is no longer simply defined by martial ability or domination. The galaxy has changed in profound ways, and in this new era, the Mandalorians must adapt or risk irrelevance. The rise of the New Republic and the development of a new galactic order offer the Mandalorians an opportunity to shift from being viewed as isolated warriors to being seen as partners and leaders who contribute to the greater good. This, however, requires them to step away from their seclusion and embrace a role that emphasizes cooperation, reconciliation, and the ability to adapt to the needs of a galaxy no longer in constant conflict. This transformation is symbolized in the rebuilding of Mandalore, a crucial task that goes beyond the physical reconstruction of their homeworld. To reclaim Mandalore as a place of peace, they must confront not just the ruins of their past, but the psychological scars of their people. Mandalore is not simply a planet, It represents the Mandalorian's soul, their collective identity. The struggle to restore Mandalore is symbolic of the larger struggle within the Mandalorian people themselves. The decision to move forward from a past of war and conquest, and to embrace a future where their identity is not defined by the need to fight, but by the capacity to heal and unite. In rebuilding Mandalore, the Mandalorians will need to acknowledge the role of their warrior spirit, not as a tool for subjugation or domination, but as a symbol of resilience, honor, and defiance in the face of oppression. Their strength, in this context, becomes a tool for defense, not offense. And the challenge will be ensuring that Mandalore's new identity is not rooted in violent dominance, but in the ability to work together as a united people, embracing change and finding peace without sacrificing their sense of self. At the heart of this transition will be the new leaders who rise to guide the Mandalorian people. Sabine Wren is one of the most pivotal figures in this movement, as she represents the shift in Mandalorian thinking, a shift from warrior culture to a culture of creation, unity, and diplomacy. Sabine has already demonstrated her ability to lead not by force, but by inspiration. She has rejected the old ways and sought to redefine Mandalorian identity, showing that the Mandalorians can honor their warrior traditions without being bound by them. Sabine's leadership is a crucial part of the movement to transform the Mandalorians from a people defined by conflict into a people who can coexist and thrive within a peaceful galaxy. Bo-Katan Kryze also plays a significant role in this transformation. As someone who has long been at the center of Mandalorian political struggles, Bo-Katan has witnessed firsthand the destructive nature of their warrior culture. However, she has also recognized that true leadership requires more than just strength. It requires the ability to unite and lead with wisdom. Bo-Katan's leadership style reflects a shift away from the militaristic past toward a future where the Mandalorians can embrace their warrior spirit while also contributing to the galaxy's peace. By leading with purpose, hope, and a vision of unity, Bo-Katan has shown that the Mandalorians can achieve peace without compromising their identity. Both Sabine and Bo-Katan's leadership styles emphasize the need for reconciliation and growth. They understand that the Mandalorian's past cannot be erased, but it can be learned from. The curse, while deeply rooted in Mandalorian history, does not have to define the future. The Mandalorians can embrace their warrior culture without being consumed by it, using their strength to defend and build rather than to conquer and destroy. This transformation will not be easy, but it is possible. The Mandalorians, through the leadership of their new generation and their willingness to embrace change, have the potential to redefine themselves in the post-Empire galaxy. They will no longer be a people defined by their past mistakes, but by their ability to adapt and create a new legacy, one that values cooperation over conflict and healing over conquest. For the Mandalorians, the future is uncertain, but the opportunity for growth and change is there. It is up to them to seize it, to build a future where they can be proud of their history without being chained by it. The Mandalorian curse may be a part of their past, but it does not have to be their future. As the Mandalorians move forward into this new chapter of their history, the challenges they face are not just external, but also deeply internal. The curse that has haunted them for so long is tied not only to their history of violence and war, but also to their inability to break free from a culture of pride, conquest, and warrior dominance. However, breaking this curse requires more than just the shift in leadership that figures like Bo-Katan Kryze and Sabine Wren represent. The transformation must also come from within the Mandalorian people themselves, who must confront their own deeply ingrained values and find new ways to connect with each other and the galaxy. The Mandalorians have always been a proud and resilient people, but their pride has often led to self-destruction. Their warrior culture, while noble in many respects, has fostered an identity that is too often tied to combat and domination. As the galaxy continues to evolve and recover from the destruction caused by the Empire, the Mandalorians must adapt to the changing times. This is not an easy task, as their traditional values of strength and honor must be balanced with the new realities of the galaxy, realities that no longer require military conquest, but a more nuanced approach to leadership, collaboration, and growth. For the Mandalorians to break free from the curse that has defined their people for centuries, they must first recognize the true cost of their warrior culture. While the warrior spirit has served them well in certain circumstances, it has also caused great harm. The cycle of violence and conflict that has been perpetuated by the Mandalorians' deep attachment to their martial identity has left them vulnerable to both internal division and external threats. Their constant desire for conquest has often clouded their judgment, leading them to alienate other factions, engage in unnecessary wars, and fracture their society in the process. This attachment to warfare as a means of proving their honor has led to destruction, not glory. One of the most significant steps in this transformation is the rebuilding of Mandalore. The planet itself is not just a physical location, but a symbol of the Mandalorian soul, scarred by centuries of war and conflict, but still capable of renewal. As the Mandalorians seek to restore their homeworld, they must also restore themselves. This process will require not only the rebuilding of cities and infrastructure, but the healing of relationships that have been damaged by years of division and betrayal. Mandalore must be a place of reconciliation, not just a battleground. In this new era, the Mandalorians must see their homeworld as a symbol of peace, a place where their people can come together, heal, and redefine themselves. The new Mandalorian leadership, especially figures like Sabine Wren, will be key to this transformation. Sabine's journey from warrior to artist, from fighter to diplomat, represents the potential for a new generation of Mandalorians who can balance the traditional warrior ethos with the need for peace and collaboration. Sabine is a living example that the Mandalorian identity can evolve, that the warrior spirit can be channeled into something more productive than endless conflict. Her embrace of her past, combined with her ability to look toward a more peaceful future, makes her an important figure in the redemption of the Mandalorians. Sabine's work, especially in her role as a mentor and leader, will serve as a bridge between the old and new Mandalorians. She represents the hope that the Mandalorians can break free from their curse and redefine their place in the galaxy. Her artistic endeavors, her leadership in rebuilding Mandalore, and her work to unite the clans show that the Mandalorians can be more than just a warrior race. They can be creators, builders, and diplomats. The Mandalorians have long been defined by their combat skills, but they have the potential to be defined by their ability to build relationships and create peace. Sabine's leadership, alongside the efforts of Bo-Katan Kryze and other Mandalorian leaders, will be critical in helping the Mandalorians redefine their identity. Bo-Katan, a leader who has seen firsthand the consequences of Mandalorian pride and violence, understands that their survival as a people is tied to their ability to adapt to the galaxy's new political realities. She will play an essential role in reconciling the clans and leading them toward a new vision of Mandalore, one that is not driven by a desire for military dominance, but by a commitment to unity and peace. However, the change within the Mandalorian people is not just dependent on their leaders. It will require the entire population to embrace a new identity. For the Mandalorians to succeed, they must look inward and confront the toxic aspects of their culture, specifically their addiction to war. and violence. This cultural shift will take time, but it will begin with the next generation. If the youth of Mandalore can embrace the values of healing and cooperation, then they will become the force that pushes the Mandalorians forward, out of the shadows of their violent past and into a future where they are defined by peace and understanding. As the Mandalorians continue their journey of transformation, one of the most important factors in breaking the Mandalorian curse is their ability to navigate the galaxy's evolving political landscape. The New Republic, while still in its infancy, represents the galaxy's best hope for a stable and just future. However, it is also fragile, and the Mandalorians' role in the new era is not yet defined. The galaxy is still recovering from the damage caused by the Empire, and the power vacuum left in its wake has allowed new threats to arise, including the First Order and other dark forces that seek to fill the void left by the Empire's collapse. The Mandalorians' involvement in this galactic struggle will play a crucial role in shaping the future of both the New Republic and the galaxy at large. The Mandalorians' place in the galaxy has long been defined by their status as a warrior race. But as the galaxy moves toward peace and reconciliation, their identity must evolve. For the Mandalorians to fully break free from their violent past, they must shift their focus from combat and conquest to cooperation and diplomacy. The Mandalorians' relationship with the New Republic and other factions in the galaxy will be a key part of this transformation. No longer can the Mandalorians afford to be seen as just a militaristic society. They must become a constructive and peaceful part of the galactic community. A significant challenge for the Mandalorians lies in rebuilding trust with the rest of the galaxy. For centuries, the Mandalorians have been seen as threats. Their violent history, coupled with their resistance to outside authority, has made them pariahs in the eyes of many. As the New Republic seeks to unite the galaxy, the Mandalorians must prove that they are not only capable of protecting their people, but that they are willing to work together with others to create a stable and peaceful galaxy. This will not be an easy task, as the Mandalorians must confront the fear and suspicion that others have toward them. However, their involvement in the larger galactic community offers an opportunity for the Mandalorians to redefine themselves and their place in the galaxy. The role of leadership will be pivotal in this transition. Sabine Wren and Bo-Katan Kryze are at the forefront of this movement, but the entire Mandalorian people must be willing to follow their lead. As they rebuild Mandalore, they must also rebuild the Mandalorian reputation across the galaxy. This can only be achieved through cooperation and collaboration. The Mandalorians have the opportunity to be seen not as warmongers, but as builders, as a people who can contribute to the greater good of the galaxy through their strength, wisdom, and resilience. Bo-Katan Kryze's leadership will continue to be a critical element in the rebuilding process. While she may not be the ideal leader for everyone, her experience and knowledge of the Mandalorian people make her an invaluable asset as the Mandalorians work to reclaim their future. Bo-Katan, more than anyone else, understands the need for unity within Mandalorian society, and she also understands the importance of forging alliances with other factions. Her willingness to put aside past grudges and work with other leaders, such as Ahsoka Tano, shows that the Mandalorians are ready to redefine their role in the galaxy, not just as conquerors, but as contributors to peace. The New Republic has a vested interest in the success of the Mandalorians, both as a people and as a culture. If the Mandalorians can successfully break the Mandalorian curse and redefine themselves as a peaceful, cooperative people, they could become a pivotal ally in the galaxy's reconstruction. Their expertise in warfare and their resilience could be used to help the New Republic defend against emerging threats like the First Order, but only if the Mandalorians can prove that they are committed to more than just military dominance. This transformation would also help the New Republic maintain its integrity, as it would demonstrate to the galaxy that peace can be achieved through cooperation and unity, not conquest and subjugation. At the same time, the Mandalorians must also contend with the rise of the First Order, which represents a growing threat to the entire galaxy. While the New Republic may have defeated the Empire, the First Order's resurgence threatens to bring the galaxy back into a state of unrest and conflict. The Mandalorians' role in combating this threat will be crucial. Their warrior spirit, if redirected toward defending the galaxy rather than conquering it, could be a powerful force for good. But the Mandalorians must understand that their success in this effort depends on their ability to unite, cooperate, and adapt, both within their own society and in their relationships with other galactic factions. As the Mandalorians take on the responsibility of shaping the future of the galaxy, they must remember the lessons of their past. The Mandalorian curse cannot be broken by force alone. It must be broken through understanding, compassion, and unity. The future of the Mandalorians lies not in their ability to conquer, but in their ability to redefine what it means to be Mandalorian in a galaxy that is no longer defined by war and conflict. The Mandalorians must choose to build a future based on peace, cooperation, and healing for themselves and for the galaxy as a whole. A critical aspect of the Mandalorian transformation is the need to change the perception of their people. Historically, the Mandalorians have been viewed with a sense of fear and apprehension by the broader galaxy. They are often seen as mercenaries and conquerors, motivated by the desire to dominate and control. This image has been reinforced by their long history of warfare and internal conflict, as well as their independence and resistance to authority. However, the current galaxy, emerging from the ashes of the Empire, requires something different from the Mandalorians. Instead of being the isolated warrior race that has long existed at the galaxy's periphery, the Mandalorians must become integrated allies, working together with the New Republic, the Jedi, and other factions to defend and rebuild the galaxy. The transformation of the Mandalorians' identity cannot be achieved solely through political maneuvering or military strategy. It requires a shift in mindset, one that recognizes that their strength does not come from domination or violence, but from resilience, wisdom, and unity. The Mandalorians' honor has long been tied to warfare, but that honor must evolve. As the galaxy transitions into a new era, honor must be defined by protection, defense, and the ability to build a better future, rather than through the pursuit of conquest. To fully break free from the Mandalorian curse, the Mandalorians must learn to see themselves not as a people whose worth is defined by their ability to fight, but by their ability to contribute to the greater good of the galaxy. One of the most profound ways the Mandalorians can contribute to the galaxy's rebuilding is through their military expertise. The Mandalorians have long been recognized for their combat proficiency, their tactical minds, and their resilience in battle. These qualities, while once used for warfare, can now be channeled toward the defense and protection of the galaxy. The Mandalorians can offer their military skills as part of a broader galactic security effort, working alongside the New Republic and the Jedi to protect the galaxy from emerging threats, like the First Order and other forces seeking to destabilize the peace. This new role for the Mandalorians also requires them to rethink their relationship with their weaponry and military culture. While their Beskar armor has long been a symbol of their strength and warrior identity, the Mandalorians must now consider how these tools can be used for protection rather than aggression. The Beskar armor, for example, is not just a tool for battle. It is also a symbol of resilience, adaptability, and survival. In the hands of those who are willing to use it for the greater good, the armor can be a powerful symbol of unity and strength, not of war. Moreover, the Mandalorians must redefine their leadership style to align with the needs of the galaxy in the New Republic era. Bo-Katan Kryze, Sabine Wren, and other leaders who are willing to embrace peace, cooperation, and reconciliation will play a crucial role in shaping the Mandalorians' place in this new galactic order. Their leadership will be central to ensuring that the Mandalorians do not return to their old ways, but instead use their strengths to build rather than destroy. These leaders must also recognize that the Mandalorians' future lies not in independence, but in interdependence with the rest of the galaxy. A critical part of the Mandalorians' transformation will be their rebuilding of Mandalore, a task that symbolizes not only their physical restoration but their spiritual renewal as a people. The Mandalorians' role in galactic politics will be shaped by their ability to adapt to the changing times. The galaxy's post-Empire era demands flexibility and innovation. As the Mandalorians begin to embrace their evolving role in the galaxy, they are faced with the critical question of how to balance their warrior heritage with the need for peace and cooperation. Their history of combat and conquest has defined them for centuries, but as the galaxy shifts toward a new era of rebuilding and cooperation, the Mandalorians must find ways to maintain their sense of identity while also adapting to the broader galactic order. The Mandalorian people, historically defined by their attachment to the Mandalore the Great and their warrior traditions, must now rethink their role in a galaxy that requires cooperation and unity over domination and warfare. This redefinition is particularly challenging, given the Mandalorians' pride in their martial identity. For so long, the Mandalorians have viewed themselves as a force to be reckoned with, a people who could withstand any challenge through their combat skills and resilience. However, as the New Republic seeks to restore order and heal the galaxy after the collapse of the Empire, the Mandalorians must recognize that the galaxy no longer needs another warring faction. It needs builders, healers, and leaders who are capable of guiding the galaxy toward a lasting peace. The Mandalorians' legacy of warfare and conquest has often caused them to be viewed with suspicion and fear by others in the galaxy. Their reputation as mercenaries and conquerors precedes them, and it will take much to change this perception. To do so, the Mandalorians must engage in a long process of self-reflection, acknowledging the harm their violent past has caused not just to their enemies, but to themselves as well. They have, after all, been the architects of their own destruction. The curse they face is not only about external conflict, but also about their inability to break free from their self-destructive tendencies. This is why the Mandalorian curse is so difficult to overcome. The Mandalorians themselves are often the agents of their downfall. If they are to escape this cycle, they must first look inward and redefine what it means to be Mandalorian. The leaders of the new Mandalore, figures like Sabine Wren, Bo-Katan Kryze, and others, will play pivotal roles in this transformation. Their leadership will be defined not by their ability to lead their people into battle, but by their ability to unite the Mandalorian clans around a new vision for the future. Sabine Wren, in particular, has shown that leadership can be about more than just military prowess. It can be about compassion, creativity, and the willingness to change. As someone who has rejected the traditional warrior mentality, Sabine represents a new generation of Mandalorians who see their strength not as a tool of domination, but as a force for healing and reconstruction. Her decision to walk away from the destructive path of war and instead pursue a future built on understanding and unity will be central to the Mandalorians' ability to break free from their curse. Similarly, Bo-Katan Kryze's leadership, represents a bridge between the old Mandalore and the new. While she has long been a symbol of the Mandalorian warrior spirit, her experiences and leadership have shown that it is possible to honor the warrior past while also embracing the need for peace and reconciliation. Bo-Katan has been instrumental in rebuilding Mandalore after its devastation, and her efforts to unite the clans will be crucial in helping the Mandalorians forge a new path forward. However, Bo-Katan also understands that this process of unity requires the Mandalorian people to embrace change. The old ways of division and warfare must be cast aside in favor of a new vision, one where the Mandalorians can honor their past, but no longer be defined by it. The internal divisions within Mandalorian society will remain a significant challenge. The clan system, which has long been the foundation of Mandalorian society, can no longer be allowed to fragment the people. While the clans have always been an important part of Mandalorian identity, their factionalism has also been one of the main reasons for the Mandalorians' repeated failures. The clans must find a way to unite under a single banner, one that emphasizes cooperation and shared goals, rather than individual power and domination. This will require a cultural shift, one that may be difficult for many to accept. But it is essential for the Mandalorians to move beyond the past and build a future that is not defined by internal conflict, but by shared purpose. The Mandalorians must also consider their role in the larger galactic community. In the past, they have often been seen as outsiders, a people who prefer to live on the fringes of galactic politics and who define themselves by their independence rather than their connections to others. This self-imposed isolation has led to a lack of trust between the Mandalorians and other galactic factions. But the post-Empire galaxy is one where alliances and cooperation are necessary for survival. The Mandalorians can no longer afford to be isolated. They must seek alliances with the New Republic, the Jedi Order, and other factions if they are to protect their people and secure a peaceful future for Mandalore. The opportunity for the Mandalorians to redefine their identity and their role in the galaxy is immense. They have the chance to break free from the cycles of violence that have long defined them and to build a new future based on peace, understanding, and cooperation. But this transformation will not be easy. The Mandalorians will face significant challenges, both internal and external, as they attempt to reconcile with their past and embrace a new future. However, with strong leadership, unity, and a willingness to change, the Mandalorians have the potential to rewrite their story, one that is no longer defined by war and destruction, but by healing and growth. As the Mandalorians continue their journey of transformation, their future will increasingly rely on their ability to adapt not only to the changing galaxy, but also to their own evolving identity. The task ahead is no small feat. In the aftermath of centuries of conflict, it is easy for the Mandalorians to fall back into their old ways, seeking honor through warfare and dominance. But the Mandalorians have the potential to be far more than just warriors. Their future lies in redefining themselves as contributors to galactic peace, leaders and guardians who stand not in opposition to others, but alongside them as a force for unity and strength built on cooperation. The post-Empire galaxy is one that is in desperate need of stability, and the Mandalorians, with their warrior spirit, resilience, and pride, are uniquely equipped to provide this strength. However, their role as the galaxy's protectors will not come from their ability to dominate or conquer. Instead, the Mandalorians must embrace their place as part of a larger galactic community, offering their talents and their courage in the service of peace. This will be a significant shift for a people who have long identified themselves by their ability to fight rather than their ability to lead with wisdom and compassion. The Mandalorian curse, which has defined their past, will continue to challenge them as they move forward. For centuries, the Mandalorians have been trapped in a cycle of war and destruction, each victory ultimately leading to another round of conflict and betrayal. Breaking this cycle requires the Mandalorians to learn that honor can be found, not in battle, but in the ability to heal their wounds, rebuild, and foster cooperation with others. It requires a new generation of Mandalorian leaders to emerge, who will guide their people toward a future defined by understanding, collaboration, and the ability to forge alliances with other galactic powers. The future of the Mandalorians and their place in the galaxy will depend on how well they can adapt to the evolving needs of the galaxy, rather than relying on old ways of thinking and being. One of the major challenges facing the Mandalorians will be the rebuilding of Mandalore. While the physical restoration of the planet is vital, the spiritual restoration of the Mandalorian people will be just as important. Mandalore has been scarred by centuries of war and conflict, and its surface is a reflection of the people who inhabit it, broken and fractured by the cycles of violence and betrayal that have defined their culture. The Mandalorians must now find a way to heal their homeworld, not just in a physical sense but in a cultural and spiritual sense as well. This will require them to confront their past, acknowledge their mistakes, and choose a new path forward, one where their identity is not defined by the wars they fought, but by the peace they create. This rebuilding process will require the Mandalorians to acknowledge their history of violence and destruction, while also honoring the resilience and strength that have made them who they are. Mandalore must no longer be a place defined by the battlefields of the past, but by the efforts of the Mandalorian people to create a new future, one where the Mandalorians can live in harmony with the galaxy, contributing to peace, unity, and the rebuilding of their society. This is a monumental task, but it is one that the Mandalorians must undertake if they are to break the curse that has bound them for centuries. The Mandalorians must find ways to forge alliances and build relationships with those who were once their enemies, the Jedi, the Republic, and even factions like the Hutt cartel or remnants of the Sith. Mandalore will not just be a symbol of war and battle, but a beacon of hope, where the Mandalorians can prove to the galaxy that they are capable of more than just violence. Through leadership, resilience, and a commitment to peace, the Mandalorians can break free from the curse that has haunted them for centuries and create a new future for themselves and the galaxy. It is through this transformation, from warriors to builders and leaders, that the Mandalorians will find their true place in the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as healers, protectors, and contributors to a peaceful galaxy. As the Mandalorians continue their journey toward breaking the Mandalorian curse, the critical aspect of their future lies in their cultural evolution. The Mandalorian people must come to terms with the fact that their warrior identity cannot define them forever. Their long history of conflict, domination, and pride has shaped their worldview and their society, but in the modern galaxy it has become an impediment to their growth and survival. The curse that has followed them for so long is a direct result of their attachment to a past of violence and war, and as the galaxy moves forward into an era of peace and rebuilding, the Mandalorians must learn to evolve. One of the most important steps in this transformation is the redefinition of Mandalorian honor. For centuries, honor has been tied to military victory, strength in battle, and conquest. To the Mandalorians, honor meant the ability to defeat their enemies and impose their will on others. However, this definition of honor is deeply flawed. It is built on the assumption that strength lies in violence and domination rather than in cooperation and healing. The Mandalorians must now ask themselves, What does it mean to be honorable in a galaxy that is no longer defined by war? What does honor look like when the cycle of violence has finally been broken? The Mandalorian's warrior spirit will always be an important part of their identity, but it must be rechanneled into a force for good. The Mandalorians are resilient, resourceful, and unwavering in the face of adversity, traits that are crucial in the rebuilding of the galaxy. But rather than using their resilience to fight wars and dominate others, they must learn to use it to build a future that is cooperative and peaceful. The curse that has followed them for generations is rooted in their inability to recognize that true strength is not just in the ability to conquer, but in the ability to create and rebuild. The question the Mandalorians must answer is, can they find a new sense of honor that is not tied to violence? Can they redefine themselves as a people who use their warrior spirit for good rather than destruction? The transformation will not be easy, but it is necessary for their survival. The Mandalorians' ability to adapt, to let go of the old ways, and to embrace a new understanding of honor will be what determines their future. At the heart of this transformation is the next generation of Mandalorians, those who have been raised in a time of relative peace, free from the constant warfare that characterized the past. The younger Mandalorians, like Sabine Wren, represent the future of the Mandalorian people. Sabine's journey from warrior to artist, from fighter to diplomat, embodies the shift in how the Mandalorians can approach the galaxy. Her decision to embrace a new way of thinking, one that values creativity and collaboration over conquest and dominance, shows that the Mandalorians can evolve and grow beyond their warrior identity. In addition to Sabine, Bo-Katan Kryze plays a crucial role in guiding the Mandalorians toward this new identity. Bo-Katan, a figure who has seen the destructive nature of the old Mandalorian ways, is in a unique position to bridge the gap between the warrior past and the peaceful future. While Bo-Katan remains deeply rooted in the warrior culture, her leadership has shown that it is possible to honor the old ways without being bound by them. She recognizes the need for unity and healing within the Mandalorian people and works tirelessly to unite the clans and reclaim Mandalore. Bo-Katan's leadership, though rooted in the warrior traditions, has also become a symbol of reconciliation and rebuilding. The Mandalorian's future will also require a rebuilding of trust with the broader galaxy. For too long, the Mandalorians have been seen as outsiders, a people who are difficult to trust due to their history of mercenary work and warfare. The galaxy will be wary of the Mandalorians' intentions, and the Mandalorians will need to prove that they are capable of peaceful coexistence with other factions. This will require the Mandalorians to not only change their approach to warfare, but also their approach to relationships with other galactic powers. They will need to show that they are not just a people capable of defending their own, but a people capable of working together with others for the greater good. Ultimately, the Mandalorians will need to embrace their role as protectors and leaders within the galaxy. The warrior spirit that defines them must be channeled into a force for good, one that defends, heals, and creates a better future for all. The Mandalorians have the strength to break free from the cycle of violence and domination that has defined them for so long. Their honor can be found in the willingness to change, to adapt, and to create a future that honors their past without being shackled to it. In conclusion, the journey to break the Mandalorian curse is a monumental one, but it is not without hope. The Mandalorians, a people defined by their warrior spirit, resilience, and pride, are at a crossroads in their history. For generations, they have been trapped in a cycle of violence, domination, and destruction. However, the galaxy has changed, and with it, the opportunities for the Mandalorians to redefine themselves. The new generation of Mandalorians, exemplified by figures like Sabine Wren and Bo-Katan Kryze, represents the chance for transformation from a people who once sought glory through war to a people who can lead through unity, healing, and cooperation. The path forward for the Mandalorians will not be without challenges. The galaxy will remain wary of them due to their violent past, and their internal divisions will continue to test their unity. But the Mandalorians have the potential to forge a new identity, one that values cooperation over conflict, healing over domination, and unity over division. By acknowledging their past mistakes and using their strength for the greater good, they can break free from the curse that has bound them for centuries and contribute to a galaxy that is defined not by war, but by peace and reconciliation. Ultimately, the future of the Mandalorians lies in their willingness to evolve and adapt to the changing realities of the galaxy.